did you come up? Did you grow up in a musical household? How did music come into your life?
Oh boy. Well, we grew up in a small town in between two towns, actually. We weren't actually in a town. We were on RFD2 road, between Lancaster, New Hampshire, and Groveton, New Hampshire. We lived in a very small 3-room log cabin. I would say no more than 400 to 500 square feet. I mean, it was so small that me and my brother had to have a bunk beds in our bedroom because we didn't have enough room for 2 beds. There was no running water. We had to get water from a well. I mean, we lived, my parents didn't have shit. My father worked at a paper mill when he worked, and some of the times he just didn't work, and then my mother would have to go out and get jobs. So, we had a pretty rough first 10 years of our life until, my mother was smart enough to finally leave my father. But yeah, we were pretty isolated because, like I said, we didn't really live in a town. So we didn't really have any people to hang out with and play with and stuff like that. We heard music. My mom sang in like the church choir when she was, young, and my father would play, Hank Williams and Johnny Cash and
Sure.
Merle Haggard and stuff like that, when we were, kids.
Is that the first stuff that kind of came across your radar screen? Is some of that? I don't know if they would call that outlaw country back then, but Merle Haggard and
yeah, they didn't really call it outlaw country back then. It was country. It's not like what you hear today is not country at all. They try to, I mean, this is the old school country that we listen to.
Sure.
And, I mean, that was the first music that we heard because we had no way to get music where we were, I mean, what was there, like 3 channels on TV? I mean, we're talking about the 60s, 50s and 60s here,
Sure.
So honestly, the first time we heard rock and roll was when the Beatles played on the Ed Sullivan Show in 1964. We heard about that, and my mother decided that she would let us get out of bed because it was past our bedtime when Ed Sullivan Show came on. I don't remember what time it was, but it was past our bedtime. So she let us get out of bed. We saw the Beatles for the first time. That was like really the first rock and roll that we had seen, on TV and whatnot. And we were just like, wow. That was like, it left an impression on us, like, this is what we want to do with our life,
That's incredible. It's incredible considering, you weren't in like a very musical environment that you would see that and it just infused excitement into you. And I'm assuming living in isolated existence like that. I'm assuming having a younger brother, that you and your brother were very, very close growing up. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that was the thing. We had to really search to find music because there was nobody around. My mother, basically what happened was after the Ed Sullivan Show in 64, my mom left my father the next year, and we moved to Lancaster, which was another small town. That's the town we were both born in. And my mom had a girlfriend that had a daughter that was like a few years older than we were, right? Mm-hmm. And she had records by like the Herman's Hermits and the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and bands like that, Dave Clark 5, the Kinks, stuff like that. So we started hearing like the more British invasion stuff probably than anything, and that was like some of the first bands that we actually heard,
Sure.
and we loved all of that stuff. I mean,
Interesting. The British invasion stuff, really resonated with these two young kids, growing up in really rural New Hampshire. That's how far-reaching, that wave was in the '60s. Interesting.
yeah. And so, we were like, I was 10 years old in 65 and my brother was like 9, so, a few more years go by and we're grabbing onto any kind of music. Well, not any kind, but all the kind of music that we, wanted to hear. And then we started listening to stuff like, Led Zeppelin's first album came out and that changed a lot of things. And then as the late 60s, early 70s came about, that's when we, started to buy instruments and, we had to save our money to buy instruments because we didn't have any fucking money, and we didn't want to work. So a lot of times we would go to stores and steal records and stuff like that, or steal stuff that we could sell to our friends so we could make money, so we could buy shit, and so then we started getting into bands like Alice Cooper, David Bowie. It was like that. What do you call it? Like shock rock type. What they want to call it.
Well, Ray Hogan asks, like, what was the first extreme music you heard? And dare I say, probably something like Alice Cooper, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was stuff like, I mean, we saw the Alice Cooper original band in '72.
Nice.
The Schools Out. And we saw the same year, we saw the Bowie Ziggy Stardust tour,
Wow.
So basically what we had to do, me and my brother, we had to, we would get magazines like Circus Magazine or Rock Scene Magazine or any of these magazines that would, have anything musical in it, and that's how we found out about a lot of bands because I mean, what was there? 3 TV channels back in the fucking '60s, I mean. And where we lived, there was nothing going on. No bands were playing in fucking New Hampshire,